Hi, my name is Jim Gibson, and I have been in politics for 30 years, elected official for 20. So when we talk about some of these things on my YouTube account, it comes from experience. You cannot be actively involved in politics for all those years and not learn a handful of stuff. So, one of the things we want to talk about today, we want to talk about everyone is getting a mailed-in ballot. I mean, that just sounds fantastic, and not every state's doing this, but there's a good handful of states that want to do this, and they're going to send out those ballots, and everyone will get a chance to vote. And it just sounds so good. I mean, really, you look at it, it just sounds like it's a fantastic idea. Everyone's going to have a chance to vote. We have a virus right now. I mean, who wants to go to the polls and catch something evil? It's going to kill you, right? So you're forward thinking, and you're trying to help the electorate voice their opinion. Every vote counts, they say. Well, let me tell you, that's far from the truth. Just talk about some things. Everyone's going to get a ballot. Everyone can open it up and vote and everything else. Well, let me give you a little bit of background from an individual who has campaigned many times in the past. And one of the things that you do is that when you campaign is you get a list from the Registrar of Voters of everyone that's registered to vote. And so what you do is you walk. It's called walking. And so you go and you have your literature in your hand, and you go to each house and you knock on the door and you say, "How you doing, Mrs. Jones?" or whatever's on the list. Excuse me, whatever's on the list. You say the person's name. "Hey, I'm Jim Gibson, and I'm running for school board." I've done this a million times. At least it seems like it's a million times. And you talk to the person, you shake their hands, and they say that if a candidate goes and talks to a possible future voter, that person would most likely vote for you because they've met you. They haven't met your competition, because not everyone does this, knocks on doors. There's some people who are proud of it. Some candidates, they go out and they knock on 10,000 doors. I have never done that. This is tedious, especially when you're in September in California. It can be hot, and some of these houses are on top of the hill. And so you got to walk up and you got to knock, and if they're not there, you mark it off on the list to visit them again some other time. You leave a door hanger so they know you've been there, and you make a little statement on there, "Hope I can get your vote, and thank you for registering to vote. And don't forget to vote on this November." And so you go through all that stuff, and it sounds pretty cool and everything else. And you get this list from the Registrar of Voters. It tells you everything you want to know. In fact, you can order special lists from the Registrar of Voters in California. You can ask for just Republicans or just Democrats. You generally get a list that says most likely to vote. They voted in every single election in the last 5-10 years. So this person's a voter. Then you can, you don't go to houses where they're most likely not going to vote, or not going to vote for you because you're a conservative and they are a Democrat liberal or something. So sending ballots out to every single house, how could that be horrible? Well, a situation happened up in Orange County, California, 2 years ago. It's a pretty conservative area, southern Orange County. And those individuals that were running for Congress and some other seats up there, most of them were incumbents, and they were elected many times with a really nice margin. So when election night came along, there was all celebrations because they were reelected into the position that they were running for, that they have been incumbents many, many years. And but 10 days later, when all the absentee ballots were counted, what happened? They lost, and they lost by a slim margin. And so they're trying to figure out what happened. And what they found out happened was, of course, their opponent had their volunteers, and we're talking about Democrats and liberals, had their volunteers go to each of the houses that had absentee ballots, and they knocked on the door, and I'm sure they did it both to Democrats and Republicans. And they had a little badge that said, help get the vote out. This is a representative of We Love Voting or something like that on the badge. And they were appropriately dressed. They were friendly, had a big smile on their face. And they said, we're here to help you with your ballot, your mail-in ballot. Have you sent it in yet? And of course, you can also order that list from the Registrar of Voters. It says those individuals that are going to get a ballot and those individuals who have not sent their ballot in yet. So they knock on the door and they say, Mrs. Smith, I'm here, here's my badge, I'm an official, and I'm here to help you vote. Do you need any assistance? And the person, says yes or no or whatever. And they say, if you fill out your ballot right now, I'll take it and I'll deliver it directly to the Registrar of Voters. And the person's thinking, well, this is fantastic. This person's going to help me here. Now, in my opinion, that when they got the Republican ballot and it wasn't filled out the way they wanted it filled out, they threw it in the trash. When they got the Democratic ballot, they turned that into the Registrar of Voters. And if you don't believe that happens, you are naive. This happens all the time. And it's called ballad harvesting. Some states outlaw it, that people showing up and taking ballots is illegal. In California, it is not. And so all these ballots were taken. And then, of course, most of the times they wait to the last moment, maybe the day before, and they deliver all these ballots to the Registrar of Voters, or a couple days before, they'll actually put the stamps on there. So they know that if they go to a house where a person is identified as a Democrat, they're pretty sure they're going to vote for the Democratic candidate. At the same time, they also make recommendations. They say things like, you don't know who to vote for. Let me help you. Let me tell you about this person. Let me tell you about that person. And this is how you should vote. And then, they check it off right there and they sign it. They gave the ballot. They turn it in. And so they give it to the volunteer who is nonpartisan, of course, or at least that's how they come across. And they take that ballot and, again, they turn it in a few days later, or most likely, a couple days before the election. And so, you'd think, well, how could that affect an election? Well, if you're running for an office, you only need a couple percentage, just 2 or 3%, maybe tops 5% to win an election. And the reason why, a lot of people don't realize this because they say 49% of the voters are going to vote for the Republican and 49% of the voters are going to vote for the Democrat. Well, that means that you can swing that vote by 1%. If you can just swing that vote by 1%, or you can get your people to show up more than the other side, then you win. No elections are won on you trying to get 50% plus 1 votes. They say that all the time, but that's not true. Really, the election is between those individuals who have not yet decided the swing vote, the small percentage. So if you can go out and you can harvest their vote, the people who are so busy that they just don't have time to open up the ballot statement and fill it out. But since you're there and you said you'll put a stamp on it for them, or you'll deliver it right to the Registrar of Voters, let's do it now. This is the way to do it. Make your vote count. And that's called voter harvesting. Happens all the time. And I do believe that probably they get a list of people that have, let's say, from the other party, a list of Republicans that have not voted yet, and they take those ballots, and I'm pretty sure they get thrown in the trash. Their vote does not count. So don't believe this nonsense that everybody's vote counts and we need it, because it just isn't going to happen. And then the other story, you notice that the left seems to hate that voters have or should show an ID. They're always fighting against it. Well, the minorities, you're trying to squelch the minorities from voting. And my first thought is, really? Minorities don't have IDs? They don't know how to go down and get a driver's license or an ID. Like in California, you can get an ID for free. Driver's license is going to cost you a little bit. But minorities don't have driver's license? They're not smart enough to get a driver's license? Come on, man. You know that they have the ability to get an ID or a driver's license. You know, you get onto an airplane, you got to show your driver's license. You go to a bank to cash a check, you got to show your driver's license. Most things in life, you have to have a government ID to do. And yet you have a group of people, it's usually the left, are doing everything they can to prevent people from being able to show an ID. And I'll tell you the reason why. I voted 2 years ago when I was supposed to, and I showed up at my polling area, my polling booth area. And when I showed up there and they make you sign in, they don't ask for an ID. I'd be happy to show my ID. I'm not embarrassed of who I am, and I do have an ID. And I do believe that 99.9% of adults have IDs. But when you show up to vote, they don't ask for an ID here in California. So I remember the last time I showed up to vote, and they asked me for my name and my address and everything else, and I gave it to them. And then they take their little book and they slide it out to you, and you have to sign your name there. And for years now, I had been saying, every time I sign my name, I say, you know, my 4 children, their names are right here with my address. They don't live with me anymore. Most of them live outside the state. All of them don't even live in this county anymore. So is there any way we can get these off the voting records? And I say this all the time. And well, how could that affect you? Well, how it affects you, how it all comes together is, again, you go down. If you want to use fraud, you go down to the Registrar of Voters, and they will give you minute by minute who voted in that precinct. And so what you do is you get a list of those individuals who have not voted. And usually how I have done it with my volunteers is we called those people up and we'd say, hey, I know it's a busy day, but it's really important that if you support, Jim for school board, then please go and vote now. Is there any problems you have? I could, someone can come by and pick you up and drive you to the polls, and you can vote for your favorite candidates, and we'll drive you home. That's one way. There's another way that the left does that's not legitimate and is not ethical. And what they actually do is they get the list of people who have not voted late in the day, and then they send people in. So they say, hey, say you're, John Brown, and say that, you're here to vote and you live at 1819 Main Street. And so these people go into the ballot area, into the voter area, and they say to the volunteers there who are handling all the paperwork and all, they say that name, they are not that person, but they're not required to show ID, so that's okay. As far as, here's it is. Oh, you say you're from 1818 Main Street? Yep, that's you, John Brown. And then they sign John Brown and they go take the ballot and they vote. There's people that are that devious that actually do that, and it's organized ahead of time. Remember, you don't have to have 50% of the vote. You don't have to work for all that vote, because generally speaking, if you have a D after your name, the majority of people who are registered Democrats are going to vote Democrat. If you have an R after your name, the majority of Republicans are going to come in and they're going to vote for the Republican. You get the person in between. If you can get that person in between, or the person that didn't show up to vote, or the person that has a ballot and it sits at their house and they haven't filled it out yet, if you can get that person to vote for you, or you can stifle someone from voting for your opponent, then you win. You only need a couple of percentages. A couple hundred votes can sway an election. So do we want to send out ballots to every single person? When I would go from house to house, and I would have my little list with me on a clipboard of people who are registered to vote, and I would, of course, I would be after the people who are most likely going to vote for me, which were the Republicans, get the vote out type of thing. I would knock on the door and I would say, good morning, ma'am. Are you Betty Jones? And she would say, no, I'm not Betty Jones. I said, well, who are you? And she would say, well, I'm Samantha Smith. And I would say, oh, yeah, I see you here. But it says Betty Jones is here also. And no, Betty Jones is not here. Well, how about Bob, Dallas? Is Bob Dallas here? No, Bob Dallas isn't here. Well, how about this other person? Are they there? And they would say no. And I would see sometimes 5 voters. And they would say, oh, that person left, and that they owned the house before me. Or that's my son, he lives in Montana, things like that. And then, if you send ballots out to all these people as you're collecting these ballots to turn in, you could, a volunteer could easily convince a person, well, I need to get those ballots from you to return those to the Registrar of Voters. So if you don't mind, if you still have them, would you mind if I get them? And again, elections are won on 1 or 2 percentages. So if you spend your day knocking on doors and you can harvest 100 votes, most likely, especially if you have friends doing it throughout that voting area, each person has a separate area where they run. If you can get those people, those ballots, and you could fill them out, and of course this stuff is illegal, and I have never done it, nor would I encourage you to do it, but I'm telling you, this is what happens in elections, and this is what has happened last year in the Southern Orange County section of California, and how it swung from one side, it went from red to blue. And is it illegal? What they did, what they confessed to doing, let's say, no, that's not illegal. That's called ballad harvesting. It's legal in California, and that's how these fine people. This is how the conservatives lost in South Orange County, and this is how, in my opinion, the left manipulates your vote. So you're an honest person. You go out there and vote. Here you get these activists, volunteers that are able to scam the voting system. They're able to put in all these votes that these people did not vote that way. And then they turn around and do it that way. And then your vote is watered down. So when you hear these statements that everyone's vote should count, of course everyone's vote should count. But if you don't have integrity in the system, if the system does not have integrity, then everyone's vote is not being counted at the rate that it should be. Your vote should count. Everyone's vote should count. Even people disagree with you who vote for the other side, their vote should count. It should be a fair race. And then the other lie, it's racism that you require people to have a government ID to vote. You're trying to stop them from voting. It's quite the opposite. They're trying to scam the system. So, in politics, sometimes you always hear it's for the children, and it's rarely for the children. And we want everybody's vote to count. No, they don't. They want their candidate to win. There is a difference in all these things. And don't be naive. Simplicity is sometimes deceiving because issues sometimes are a little more complex than what you and I see as face value and what people actually say. It sounds good, but it's not true. So I hope you get out there to vote for your candidate. I am not running. First time in 22 years, I think. First time in 20 years at least that I am not running. And for those of you that don't know what goes on behind the scenes, I hope I opened your eyes. Thank you for watching my video. I do appreciate it. And I hope you have a great day.